Organizational communication. I want to discuss two different management styles in this video. First is the classic management style, and the second is the systems approach. Now, the classic management style was with us from approximately the Industrial Revolution through the mid-20th century. And the systems approach is a fairly new concept. So let's first talk about the classical management approach. What does it look like? How does it operate? How does it function? Well, when you think of the military, or you think of Henry Ford's assembly line, these would be outstanding examples of the classic management style, or the apparatus that you might expect to find within an organization that has the classical management style. So two things distinguish this style. The first one is the division of labor, and the second is the hierarchy. For example, Henry Ford's assembly line, you would have people who worked on the floor, and then you would have their immediate supervisors. You might have full-time supervisors at a higher level that were in offices up around the wall, and then you would have maybe an executive office suite somewhere else where people who were in charge at the higher levels would be, etc. So it's clear that from the division of labor and the apparent hierarchical structure of management, that both of these elements are in place in factory type settings. Now, there were two important changes that occurred in the 20th century to the classical management approach. So let's talk about those. The first one is known as the human relations approach. What we saw during this time of the human relations approach was a push by companies to improve relations between employees, improve communication, in order to foster an environment that would be more conducive to getting better production. So this is where we begin to see management interacting more with employees deliberately. We can see where employees are invited into the decision-making process. In other words, I may consult with people who work on the factory floor if I need to solve a problem, because they're the ones that have their hands on the equipment every day, and they can best tell me how to solve this problem, presumably. And so cooperation between management and hourly employees was a key feature in this early human relations approach. Now, post-World War II, the human resources approach created an entire department that would field all of the employee needs. It would exist in order to facilitate greater cooperation between employees. And so this is where we saw the beginning of the office water cooler and Christmas parties and clam bakes, or I guess barbecues would be more appropriate for us here, and these sorts of things, employee recognition programs, et cetera, et cetera. The idea here behind the human relations approach initially, and later the human resources approach, was that if we took some of the impersonal features out of this cold, sterile hierarchy at work, we could improve production, we could improve employee satisfaction, these kinds of things. And they would ultimately result in a greater bottom line for us, greater efficiency across the board, and a better product for the customer in the long run. And so many companies that we see today are in fact still run under the classical management style. I spent 20 years in a corporation that uses that style. So when I worked for UPS, this is classical management style all the way. So you have a division of labor, you have a hierarchy. It's interesting there because it's even laid out. You wouldn't even have to have anyone present in the factory to know exactly what style of management they're using there, because you can see clearly where people are performing work, and then you can see where in a separate area the management of that work is occurring, and then in another level there's where you would expect to see people in a suit and tie. And so there are very clear borders between groups of employees and management in that company. It wasn't until I came to Tarrant County College in the spring of 2018 that I worked in a systems approach for the most part, though there are features of our system here that still resemble the classical management approach. That's to be expected. By and large, this is a systems approach as compared to UPS. So this has been an eye-opener for me. So the systems approach has two key features, and they are openness and adaptability. Openness. Is the company aware of its own problems and shortcomings? Do they even know why they're not able to get the job done? Do they know why they aren't able to produce enough units, or they're not able to serve the customer in the way that they need to, or whatever it is? It sounds like a silly thing, but it's not. So many companies are just happily oblivious to what's going on because they're making just enough to get by, and everybody's sort of happy enough to go along with that. So, openness. Is the company aware of its own shortcomings? Sometimes a company is painfully aware of its own shortcomings and still chooses not to do anything about it. This is the key feature of adaptability. Adaptability is the company's willingness to change, the company's willingness to acknowledge its problems from openness, and now to exert an intentional change. At Tarrant County College, for example, where we rely on the systems approach largely, everyone is sort of equally valuable. So even though I'm an instructor, I'm not viewed any differently than an administrator or someone who is on the staff. We are all sort of equally valuable. We know that we do different things and perform different roles, but there's a sense of sharing the weight of control and the power in the organization by making everyone feel like they are an equal part of the whole. So regardless of what we do there, I think we all share in that sense, and that is much to the institution's credit. All right, that's all I care to say regarding the two different management styles under organizational communication for now. I did want to end by clarifying a definition that I included on the lecture notes that accompany this video. You'll note on there where I gave you the definition of organizational culture. People seem to get confused by this, and I believe they are just out thinking themselves. Culture just means the values, norms, customs, practices, attitudes of a given subset of people. So when we talk about an organizational culture, we're just talking about those values and practices, but within an organization. So for example, UPS has its own organizational culture. You could find their values and their attitudes reflected in their mission statement. Tarrant County College has theirs. It's a little bit different. If I worked for a different company, they would have their own statement. The point is, every company will have a slightly different organizational culture depending on where you work. So you should expect differences anywhere you go. All right, that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I'll catch up with you real soon.